Good morning. It is a gorgeous morning. This is the Debrief, and I'm ABC's Lana Zach. It's a big night tonight with the State of the Union. There's also a new set of subpoenas heading over to the Trump administration, this one related to inauguration, and of course the very latest developments in the Virginia governor's office. We'll have all that and more, but first, here are your headlines.
At least 10 are dead in an apartment building fire in Paris that may be arson. One woman is now in custody.
Look at the strength of the blaze. Orange and purple flames shooting out of windows, roaring for 6 hours as emergency services battled to get to those trapped.
In Abu Dhabi, Pope Francis continuing his visit to the Arabian Peninsula, birthplace of Islam, celebrating an open-air mass at a sports stadium, first ever papal mass on the peninsula.
Well, there's a new number one. Chicago O'Hare International is now the busiest airport in the U.S. The FAA says more than 903,000 flights passed through O'Hare last year.
Climate change may be changing the color of our oceans. Scientists say some places will be more blue, while others more green, driven by microorganisms that are either dying off or growing out of control. Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg has been out and about. The justice, who has missed arguments at the court after undergoing cancer surgery, attended a production last night in her honor in Washington, D.C.
So it is a huge night in Washington with the State of the Union now rescheduled, happening tonight. And President Trump's theme is going to be unity, but we already understand that he has been tweeting about that. He said today, I see Schumer is already criticizing my State of the Union speech, even though he hasn't seen it yet. He's just upset that he didn't win the Senate after spending a fortune like he thought he would. Too bad we weren't given more credit for the Senate win by the media. So the theme, unity, and for that we head into the White House and the woman at the center of it all, ABC's Karen Travers. Karen, unity, really?
Yeah, if that was the president's first overture of unity as part of his State of the Union, Lana, he might have to work on some of the messaging. But tonight, the White House says the president is going to issue that call for bipartisanship in a very bitterly divided Washington. And he's speaking for the first time to a divided Congress. So the room is a little different than when he spoke there last year when the Republicans had the majority in the House and Senate. Tonight, he will have the House Democratic majority in front of him, and looming very large right behind him over his shoulder will be House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. The White House says the president is going to talk about ways that the White House can work together with Democrats on policy issues. But, Lana, that's a very big challenge right now, given that we're just a couple days removed from a 35-day government shutdown, and there's another threat of a shutdown looming at the end of next week over the issue of border security. The president has certainly been hinting that he may declare a national emergency to bypass lawmakers, get a pool of money to build the border wall. Right now, no indication he's going to lay that out tonight.
And we'll be searching Majority Leader Nancy Pelosi's face as she sits right there, as you say, over the president's shoulder. But we're not expecting a formal rebuttal from her. Instead, it's going to be coming from Stacey Abrams, who actually doesn't hold an elected office right now. She had run for the governor's race in Georgia, but lost there. She's also the first African-American woman to ever give the rebuttal. What can you tell us about that, Karen?
And that says a lot about what the Democrats see as the message they want to put out after the president gives his remarks. Usually you have somebody who's coming off a triumphant victory, somebody who's seen as the future of the party because of the position they just won. Stacey Abrams lost in her race to be the governor of Georgia, but as you say, she's the first African-American woman to deliver the State of the Union rebuttal. They certainly see her as a rising star in the Democratic Party, and they want to put forward a message about the party that they are and contrast that with what they say is the vision of the president and Republicans. Lana, it is a very, very difficult speech to give. I mean, most of the time when we're talking about the rebuttal, it's because of some awkward moment. Everybody remembers Marco Rubio in the water. You know, you have to pick which is a worse gig to do these days, the State of the Union rebuttal or the Super Bowl halftime show. We'll see what Stacey Abrams does tonight. We certainly saw the criticism of Maroon 5 on Sunday.
Absolutely. Well, the other thing, of course, people are going to be watching, and you and I will be talking about, are the people that are the invited guests. Tell us what you know about any of the invited guests that are going to be in the First Lady's box.
Yeah, this is an annual tradition where the White House brings people to come and sit with the First Lady to help the president make policy points during his remarks. And tonight, we are expecting that there will be several family members who lost relatives to crimes that the White House says were committed by undocumented immigrants, as the president makes his push for border security and the wall he wants on the U.S.-Mexico border. We're also expecting to see the first person released after that historic criminal justice bill the president signed into law late last year. The president will be highlighting that as a bipartisan accomplishment, trying to use that as a say, like, let's try and do it again on another issue. Another person that's going to get a lot of attention, Lana, is a young boy named Joshua Trump. He's a 6th grade boy from Delaware. Of course, very famous last name, not related to the president. His family says he was bullied because of his last name. The First Lady will be bringing him to the State of the Union tonight as part of that Be Best anti-bullying initiative. Lana, critics pounced on this and said of all the things you could bring somebody to make a message about bullying, the administration is choosing to do one that involves the president and his last name. But certainly that will be a moment. We'll see what the president says about him tonight.
Thank you, Karen. We'll be watching all of that. I hope that you'll be watching with us. We'll have live coverage here at 8:30 for special union coverage or special coverage of the State of the Union. And now we're going to go to a big headline coming out of Washington. New set of subpoenas coming to President Trump and his team, this one about the inauguration. And there is a particularly blistering quote from Chris Christie. I want to read that for you now. He said that the investigation presents a much more serious threat to the administration, potentially, than what Bob Mueller is doing. John Santucci, you've got your finger on the pulse. What can you tell us about that?
Hey, Lana, good morning to you. So right now we're following this rapidly developing story. What we're learning is that as Bob Mueller and the special counsel's office is winding down their investigation, prosecutors in the Southern District of New York served a subpoena yesterday to members of President Trump's inaugural committee. Remember, Lana, this is the massive fund, $107 million raised by the Trump inaugural. It's the most money raised in any presidential inauguration in modern history, double that of what Barack Obama's team raised at his first inauguration in 2009. And this subpoena, Lana, is wide-sweeping. They want documents, records, emails, text messages. They even want to know what they have in those encrypted apps that they may or may not have been using. And they're looking specifically at other people that donated to the investigation. There are individuals named that have foreign ties. There's also a credit card processing company called Stripe that has a connection to the Kushner family. One of the investors in that organization is Josh Kushner. His brother Jared, as we know, is the husband of Ivanka Trump, currently serving as a senior advisor in the Trump administration.
Now, John, let's make sure, because there's so many of these subpoenas and investigations, clarify this for our audience. This is separate and independent, and it's something that could last even after the Mueller probe has ended. Can you explain?
Sure. So what we're seeing here is that as Bob Mueller has been investigating for the last 18 months, give or take, since he was appointed in late May, early June 2017, there are cases that don't fit into the purview of Russian collusion during the 2016 election. Michael Cohen is a great example of that. His case was referred up to the Southern District of New York. This case in particular, we had been tracking for quite some time. The special counsel had been asking individuals about the inauguration, did not take action on that. Instead, it appears that all the information they gathered, they put in a box, put it in the Acela, and sent it up to New York, where prosecutors up there are now going to look into it. And what this means from the subpoena, Lana, is that this is the beginning of this investigation. You have heard all of the reporting, and we've certainly been tracking it as well, that the special counsel is nearing an end of their investigation. So as Bob Mueller is closing up shop, we are seeing the burden birth of a new investigation in New York that is going to require many people close to the president to hand over information, but also many people close to the president that will probably have to appear before a grand jury in New York.
And I know you'll be watching every second of it. Thank you, John. We're now going to head over to Richmond. The big story that has had so many people talking. Governor Ralph Northam embattled after those racist photos appeared on his medical school yearbook page. ABC News anchor Tom Yamas has been tracking it all. Tom, yesterday a lot of people felt like he was going to step down potentially after meeting with his advisors. Now that more time has passed, is it any indication that he really believes that he'll be able to weather the storm?
Well, I mean, he's definitely still hunkered down in the governor's mansion. He has no public events today or for the rest of the week that we know of so far. And allies close to Governor Northam say that he's going to fight this out. But there are fellow Democrats who have called on him to resign who say now this is more about his ego than about improving the state. Right now, we are in the State House just behind me. This is the rotunda here. A lot of history inside of this building here in Virginia, one of the first places and first states in the entire union. But right now, this is called a crossover day, and this is where the bills go from the Senate to the House, back and forth. And the Lieutenant Governor, Fairfax, he's there right now in the Senate, presiding over the Senate, and he's dealing with his own scandal as well. A report has surfaced and an accusation of sexual misconduct back in 2004. Now, he says this is a lie, that it has not been corroborated, and it's basically a political smear, but it has surfaced, and he's dealing with this as well. So there's a lot of chaos in the Capitol right now, but the big question is, will Northam resign? And the question right now, Lana, is we don't know, but so far he's digging in and no sign that he's giving up.
And Tom, do you have any sense now with the new accusation that the lieutenant governor has denied of sexual improprieties? Has that buttressed the governor at all in feeling like now that there's an allegation against his potential successor that he feels more emboldened to stay in office?
It's a great question, because then it would sort of be like, where's the line of succession? It would ultimately reside with the Attorney General if both the Lieutenant Governor and the Governor had to step down for whatever reasons. But a source close to the Democratic leadership here in the state government says that the Lieutenant Governor, Fairfax, has no idea whether Northam is waiting to see what happens with Fairfax. He can only control what he can control, and that's himself. And he personally has not called on Northam to resign, which is sort of interesting. He says that Northam will do what is best for the state, which we can interpret to mean that he should resign. But Fairfax is not calling for that right now. He says he's ready to lead, and he will step up if he has to. Northam did say at his press conference on Saturday, if he feels he can no longer lead, if he can no longer move forward, he will step aside. It's unclear what exactly he has to see or do to realize that, because nearly every politician in Virginia has called on him to step aside. But Lana, I got to point out something, having covered President Trump on the campaign trail, there is a strategy to sort of waiting the news cycle out that has worked for President Trump, both as a candidate and as the president. And Northam may be taking a page out of the Trump book to see if he can ride this news cycle out. This is one of the busiest times also right now in the State House, as I mentioned. And so he may not want to get in the way of business as usual here, but we're going to have to wait and see what happens.
Such a complicated story. It is so good to have you on it, Tom, and it's launched really a national discussion. I know it's been difficult for so many people to see that image again and again, but it's part of the difficult conversations that we need to have as a country. So thank you very much, Tom. Now we're going to go over to California, that winter weather, and Kana Whitworth, who's been following it all for us. Kana?
Hey, Lana, yeah, some people calling the snowstorm epic, the National Weather Service calling it life-threatening, but here at the resort at Squaw Creek, they have had to close their local mountain because they have received 6 feet or more of this snow. You can see it here. It's this, as I start to sink down a little bit, this really light, dry, fluffy snow. This is the kind of snow, of course, that skiers and snowboarders rejoice in, but when you have drifts like this, I mean, this is huge. If you look over here as well, some of them are about 10 feet high is what the reports are saying. So that's huge. And this is the second time that people in this area this year have been subjected to a blizzard warning, and that's no joke. And then if we go a little further south to Mammoth Lakes, people there are digging out of an unprecedented 7 feet of snow at the base of their mountain, 10 feet of snow reported at the summit there. And Lana, when we got into town yesterday, we met a guy who had parked his car outside for one day and then had a really hard time finding it because it was so buried in snow, and not that it really would have mattered anyway, because most of the major highways were all closed because of whiteout conditions. And when the wind really kicks up that snow, it's hard to see anything. We have video of our drive in. It was a little bit scary. And there are gusts reported over 70 miles an hour, so that's hard to contend with. On top of that, there are avalanche warnings all throughout the Sierra Nevadas, including here, so that's closing some highways and keeping some mountains closed as well. And we're really not out of this yet. Where I'm standing right now, we're expecting to get at least 6 more inches of snow before this whole thing is over, and even more snow over the weekend. People we spoke with here at the resort said, hey, we'll be skiing in May. So they have a really good outlook on the whole situation. Lana?
Gosh, Kana, 10 feet of snow. You look really comfortable out there. I am glad that I'm here in New York where the weather is wonderful. And for all things weather related, I of course love to turn to Ginger Z.
Lana, thank you. Isn't it so nice to have this warmth? Well, there's some issues that come with that. It's very different, though, if you go out to the west, where they've been dealing with several rounds of storms. Let's go ahead and start in Seattle, where they averaged 1.7 inches of snow in February, but they had 2 to 3 in the last 2 days. So you had people having to push their cars around on the snow and ice. And then check out in Southern California, all of that rain. San Bernardino County actually ended up with almost 11 inches in less than a week. So you had mudslides, debris flows like that. And then you go to just a little elevation outside the Bay Area, and they have a chance of seeing snow as low as, say, 1,500 feet. But Mount Diablo, the snow was flying there. So this does happen, but certainly a stormy pattern for the west. Now we'll start to see it slide east, and it's going to meet those wind chill advisories in the northern plains, so some severe cold, and then all the warmth that we have here in the northeast and southeast. Those come together, and you have an ice storm warning in a place like Chicago. So tonight through tomorrow morning, freezing rainfalls. People have a lot of questions what freezing rain is. It's rain that falls on a frozen surface or a surface that's 32 or below, and it freezes on contact. So it can create that ice that accumulates, so you can end up with 1/10 to up to 4/10 of an inch of ice. I think especially if you get away from the city, some of those overpasses or places that you'll end up with some ice issues, even power lines and trees. But the other thing is we've seen major warmth for a place like just west of Milwaukee, where this river went in 2 days from totally frozen to broken up and flowing completely normal again. So you've got ice jams, flood issues out in western New York, and all because of this. Near 60 in Boston for a high today, 72 Atlanta, 76 Jackson, Mississippi. Really, really warm stuff. And it looks like we're going to keep above average, or at least close to it, for much of this week. Lana.
Ginger, you always have the best video. I love that video of the river. The other piece of video that you shared with me, I want to share with all of our viewers. Take a look at this. A little girl, her mom finds her hiding behind the bed. She's got something in her hands. I know for my girls, it would be candy. For her, it's a chicken. She brought a chicken into the house, and her mom had to explain that that's not where chickens belong. Lennox, Xana, do not get any ideas. Don't bring anything into my house, little ones. All right, now for something completely different, we're going to head into our international news. Venezuela, we have been tracking this. And Cody Weddle, there in Caracas. Cody, humanitarian aid, we understand, is on its way. Might that tip support to Juan Guaido and really make a difference as Venezuelans seem to be reclaiming their government?
Well, it's clear that humanitarian aid will be the next battle in this political standoff, as Juan Guaido has said they plan to amass aid at 3 points on the border with Colombia, on the border with Brazil, and in some Caribbean islands. And this is so important because of the ongoing humanitarian and economic crisis that is going on here. This is the worst crisis in this country's history. Children are dying of malnutrition. People with chronic conditions don't have the medicines and treatments they need, and people can't even afford enough food, and people are losing weight. So I think Juan Guaido will be using this as a PR tool to show that his government wants to bring humanitarian aid here into the country. And so it will be difficult for Nicolas Maduro to deny this aid for the vast majority of Venezuelans who are suffering the effects of this crisis. But it is clear that, as he has done in the past, Maduro plans to deny the entry of this aid. We've seen photos coming from the border that show that the border is heavily armed, and that the government the other government, Nicolas Maduro, has no plans to allow this aid into the country. Guaidó saying he plans to attempt to convince the people at the border, the armed forces, to allow the humanitarian aid here into the country.
What a difference in the crowds that were around Guaidó and Maduro. Thank you so much, Cody. I know that it's difficult for you reporting there in Caracas, and we appreciate you being with us. Now we're going to go to Chicago. Alex Perez, who has been following everything in the case of Jussie Smollett, and police have now issued a new report. What's in it?
Yeah, Lana, you know, this is that police report that was recently released. You can see some of it has been redacted, but we are learning a few new details about the night Jussie Smollett reported being attacked to authorities. We now know that he initially did not want to report the incident. It was his creative director who convinced him to notify authorities. Now, in this report, he also told investigators that he was walking home from a nearby Subway sandwich shop to his high-rise apartment building when two masked men attacked him, yelling racial and homophobic slurs. He says they threw a noose around his neck. He also says they battered him in the face. According to the police report, it says the weapons that were used: hand, feet, and teeth. Now, it doesn't really explain, but it just goes to show you, give you an idea of what kind of injuries he may have been dealing with that evening. Now, the police report also reveals that Smollett was sober when investigators were talking to him, and it says that he walked them, took them to the area where he was attacked. He told them that he was not able to see which way those suspects fled, but he was able to talk to investigators. At this point, you know, it's 1 week ago today. Authorities say they're still working on this case, but so far no arrest. Lana?
Alex, you know, this is such a high-profile case. The entire nation, it seems like, has been talking about it. Is it strange that there are no arrests, that police don't seem to have more leads?
You know, it is a very high-profile case, one that a lot of people are talking about. That's a good question. We've posed that to authorities here, and all they would tell us is that they are continuing to work on this case. They released that one surveillance image where it's a grainy surveillance image where you see two people that they would like to speak with, but those people have not been identified. Authorities say they're now expanding the area they're reviewing video from, so they have hours of video that they're downloading and looking at. At this point, they say they have not been able to track down any video of the attack, but they're going through all of that surveillance video frame by frame, looking for any clues, anything that might help them piece this together, find these alleged suspects. But authorities say right now all they can tell us publicly is that they're working on this.
They're working on it, and I know you're working on reporting it out. Thank you so much, Alex. Now we're going to go to Brooklyn and the very latest about El Chapo and that trial. We're expecting at some point to receive a verdict, and Ariel Reshchev is following it all. Ariel?
Hey there, Lana. The marathon 10-week trial for the man considered to be one of the deadliest drug kingpins in history has taken place under unprecedented security. Jurors now deliberating those 10 counts against Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, including drug trafficking, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. Prosecutors calling more than 50 witnesses to the stand, painting Guzman as the shrewd, murderous mastermind of the ruthless Sinaloa cartel. That cartel for 20 years, Lana, the largest supplier of illegal drugs to the United States, resulting in untold thousands of American deaths. The defense calling this case a fantasy, a conspiracy, only calling one witness to the stand, resting its case after just 30 minutes. Jurors have been partially sequestered in this case, have been escorted to and from this Brooklyn courthouse by U.S. Marshals for their safety, have remained completely anonymous. Now Guzman is awaiting his fate. He faces up to life in prison. Lana?
Only 30 minutes for the defense, one witness. Ariel, thank you so much. Such an interesting case. You have been watching The Debrief. Thank you for tuning in on ABC News Live. We hope that you'll also tune into the briefing room. That's our political show at 3:30. And check out our very special State of the Union coverage at 8:30 p.m. Of course, remember to download the ABC News app. And for all of my Patriots fans, I'm going to leave you with this. Patriots fans rejoicing in the street after yet another victory. I'm ABC's Lana Zach. Thank you so much for tuning in.